Hi there. In this lecture we see Vladimir Kramnik playing against Viswanathan in 2001, the Dortmund tournament, round 9. So we see d4 from Kramnik, d5 from Viswanathan, c4, d takes c4, knight f3, e6. So the Queen's Gambit accepted, e3, knight f6, bishop takes c4, c5, white castles, a6, bishop b3, and now white accepts an isolated queen's pawn. So there are certain benefits of the isolated queen's pawn. For a start, it acts as a hook for the c5 and e5 squares. The adjacent files are quite good for white's rooks and white's piece activity in general. So these factors give white's pieces a lot of dynamic play potentially, and also d5 needs to be watched for at some point, quite often in isolated queen's pawn situations, which can help further liberate the position for white. You can imagine d5, for example, extending the scope of a rook. If imagine a rook coming to e1 and d5 opens up the rook to e7 or e8. So knight c3, we have bishop e7, bishop g5, black castles, and now quite an original plan in this game, queen d2. This looks very sensible as well. Ideas like queen f4 to h4. We have knight a5, and now bishop c2, and here b5. So you might be wondering, hold on, isn't this a bit awkward, the queen on d2? Why couldn't black play knight c4? In this case, funny enough, white can play queen d3, believe it or not. And the problem here is, if b5, bishop takes f6 is winning on the spot. And the other problem is, if knight takes b2, queen e2, and the knight's kind of stranded on b2. This is a funny position. If queen a5, bishop takes f6, bishop takes f6, knight e4, and the knight's still kind of stranded, but white's also threatening knight takes f6 check. So let's put the bishop back to e7. Black doesn't want to suffer structural damage. a4, and the knight's stranded still. Bishop d7, and it gets to be a complex scenario here after knight e5, which essentially favors white. I can illustrate this further just for interest. If, for example, bishop takes a4, rook fb1, this position, we can see that bishop d3, and we're winning material, right? That's an easy example. A more difficult example is bishop e8, this position, with bishop takes a4, bishop takes a4, rook takes b7. White has a tremendous amount of pressure points, especially f7. And this situation with g3 and rook takes f7 starts to be very dangerous for black. Queen h5 as example. And here queen takes h4 looks at the rook on d8. And essentially these scenarios, yeah, they're winning material basically. So rook takes a4 there. There's plenty of very interesting scenarios, but if we look at this again, you might not be convinced just yet. After rook takes b7, what about rook fe8? There's queen h5, if g6, queen f3, and we've got a cheapo here, rook takes e7, because the queen's looking at a8. So rook takes knight f6 check, queen takes a8, and this is also winning for white. So there are a lot of dangerous scenarios. If instead of rook fe8, bishop d8, there's knight c5, and that's a nasty pin. Rook c8, g3 is sensible here, so not to be taken in by a back row issue, which could make the tactics backfire. But g3, and black's in big trouble here without any controversy really. Bishop b5, queen b2 actually traps the black queen on a5. So yeah, there's a lot of fun and games essentially if knight c4 had been played. Yeah, it does turn out queen d3 is so powerful for trapping the knight. So b5, game on. Queen f4, rook a7, rook ad1, bishop b7. And here already there's a really thematic looking move. For 100 points, what would you play in this position? Yeah, d5, it really puts a lot of pressure on the black pieces by getting rid of this pawn. Funny stuff. So bishop takes is played. If knight takes d5, the thing is here, there's a very powerful move indeed. We see that there's a weakness of the last move to take this pawn, in that h7 has been weakened. Guess what white could play here? A very strong tactical idea. Yeah, rook takes d5 with tempo against the queen. After bishop takes, because what else? If bishop takes, then h7 is for the taking, and that's crushing. Bishop g6 for queen h4 mating. This is going to be all pretty diabolical for black here. This situation is a king chase where white ends up in a dominating position. So let's go with bishop takes d5. The thing is, bishop takes h7 check. And you might wonder what on earth is going on here. Queen h4 check. And then guess what we play here? Yeah, we just play bishop takes e7 for knight g5. And very strong, dangerous threats against the king. Black would have to give up the queen. If rook e8, queen h7 as an example, queen h8 is mating. It doesn't matter if rook e8 or rook d8, that's still going to be a mate there. So yeah, these are incredibly dangerous scenarios. Let's put it on. We see that the king's getting mated. There's no exit square on e7. So funny stuff. So yes, knight takes d5 seems completely out of the question because of rook takes d5. It's funny stuff indeed how this works. But so bishop takes d5 is played. Now here we have knight takes d5, and now e takes is played. If knight takes here, again rook takes d5 is incredibly powerful with this idea of bishop takes h7 check, queen h4 check, bishop takes e7, because knight g5, black would have to give up the queen again. So e takes is played, queen h4, and we can see that, hold on, why is this so good for white? We can see that by getting rid of the pawn, this file's really dangerous all the way to e7 if we put a rook on e1. So h5 is played. If h6, we can play bishop takes h6. If knight h7, what we can do is just bishop takes h7 check, bishop g5 check, and funny enough we have this pattern again, bishop takes e7 for knight g5, and it's difficult for black to defend without giving up the queen. So h5 is tried, rook fe1, so the white pawns are not really protecting black's position, or nor the black pawn on e6 is that e file looks super dangerous now basically. Knight c6, and to further expose the black position, there's a fantastic move played here as well. This is really a super duper Kramnik game example with the isolated queen's pawn. One of the best ever. So guess what is played here for 200 points, white to play. Remarkable stuff, but g4, believe it or not. So queen d6 is played. If knight takes g4, we have queen takes h5. If f5, there's bishop b3, and look at how weak d5 is here. If rook d7, we have a strong move in rook e6, so that hits the knight. So if the knight moves, there's going to be big issues with e7, and in conjunction with bishop takes d5, there's going to be huge issues. If queen b6, this position protecting f2 for a moment, and black is very loose after bishop f4. Black's very loose now because white is going to play bishop d6. This is quite intricate, but d5 is very vulnerable here, or rook d6, even better. Rook d6, and then d5 is super vulnerable. So this situation, black's going to have to give up material. It's worse to allow bishop takes d5 than move the rook. So if black's giving up material like this, yeah, this is all in white's favour. If we go back, instead of knight takes g4, if h takes g4, bishop takes f6, simply looking at h7. And if rook e8 instead, well, the damage is done, you know, check, queen h8. So yes, g4 is a very powerful move. So Viswanathan finds queen d6, very resourceful idea to swing by the queen side to look at h4. So g takes h5, queen b4, trying to get the queens off. Kramnik obliges h6, but this is still an advantage for white, this position. We have knight e4. If g takes h6, bishop takes this situation, rook d3 is dangerous, this rook left. Knight e4 to stop things like rook g3 check. But, you know, rook takes e4, rook g3 check is still dangerous. This position, black can end up getting mated, for example, like this. Or, if king h7, knight takes e7 check, white's just winning loads of material. Fun stuff. So, knight e4 is played. H takes g7. Also good for white is bishop takes e7. You know, this position is good for white. So h takes g7. We have rook c8. Bishop takes e7. Knight takes e7. Bishop takes e4. D takes. Rook takes e4. Rook, king takes g7. So white is a pawn up. But after rook d6, also there's king safety issues for black now. And the rook very usefully, you know, looks along these squares. Very, very useful. We have rook c5, rook g4 check. So very tricky for black. If king f8, rook d8 is checkmate. Very tricky. Very, very tricky. So king h7 is tried. But now knight f3, and white's, after knight g6, white's winning another pawn here, knight g5 check, because, yeah, here, king g7 is played. If king h6, then we're just taking out f7, and with another pawn up, with 2 pawns up. But that's similar to the game. So here, yes, 5 points. Yeah, knight takes f7. So this is winning yet another pawn. And now rook g5. The rook can't really refuse, because this position, lawnmower mate patterns, is unpleasant for black. I mean, yeah, okay, there's this move, but it's unpleasant for black. So Vishy just took the rooks off here, hoping to maybe draw this position. But b4, it's not very drawable. A takes, check, rook b1, and now rook a5. Rook takes b2, and a funny maneuver, rook a4. But this is a winning position. Viswanathan actually resigned here. If rook b3, we can demonstrate progress can be made. h4, f3, shielding the king. The king can use g3. Pass pawn there. Actually, the king can come this route and say, yeah, black plays like this. The passed b pawn should be winning here. Anytime rook takes f3, we have rook f8 check, winning the rook. So this is, it doesn't matter about this. This position is winning because the king's too exposed. There's always going to be a check now and just queening. So as example, this check and then just queening. So yeah, a really fun game. A lot of stuff, very amazing resources behind the scenes, which show the true power of the position with the isolated queen's pawn, how we can give up that pawn with a thematic d5 and get a whole load of pressure on the black position. So a really fun isolated queen's pawn example, one of the best of Vladimir Kramnik, and what against such a mighty opponent, another world champion basically, Vishy Anand. So yeah, what a great encounter in 2001. Hope you enjoyed this one, got some instructive points. Thanks so much. All comments, questions, likes and subscribes, really appreciated. Thanks so much.